Sarah Mitchell disappeared on September 15, 2009, while on a camping trip with her husband, Michael, in the remote backcountry of Yellowstone National Park. She was 6 months pregnant with their first child and had been documenting their wilderness adventure through her professional photography work when she vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions that would haunt her family for 15 years. The morning of September 3, 2009, sunlight streamed through the windows of Sarah and Michael's cozy apartment in Denver's Capitol Hill neighborhood. The hardwood floors were scattered with camping gear, carefully organized in neat piles across their living room. Sarah Mitchell, 28 years old with auburn hair that caught the light like copper, sat cross-legged on their cream-colored sofa, methodically cleaning the lenses of her professional camera equipment. Her growing belly pressed against her favorite Colorado State University t-shirt, a gentle reminder of the life growing inside her. "Babe, do you really think we need 3 different telephoto lenses for a 5-day trip?" Michael asked from the kitchen, his voice carrying the gentle teasing tone that had become their morning ritual. At 30 years old, Michael Richardson had the methodical mind of a software engineer and the protective instincts of a soon-to-be father. His dark hair was already tousled from sleep, and he wore his favorite weekend uniform of worn jeans and a flannel shirt that Sarah had bought him for Christmas. Sarah looked up from her camera gear and smiled, that radiant glow that had intensified during her pregnancy making her green eyes sparkle. "Michael, you know I can't predict what wildlife we might encounter. What if we see a family of wolves in the distance, or a grizzly bear fishing in the river? I need to be prepared for every shot." She held up her longest lens, a massive piece of equipment worth more than their car. "This baby is my livelihood, and soon it'll be how I provide for our actual baby." The apartment reflected their personalities perfectly. Sarah's nature photography covered the walls, stunning landscapes from their adventures across Colorado, Utah, and Montana. Michael's corner featured his computer setup, multiple monitors displaying code even on weekend mornings, though today they showed research about Yellowstone's hiking trails and camping regulations. Books about pregnancy and parenting were stacked on the coffee table next to trail maps and camping permits that Michael had organized with the precision of a project manager. "I've been thinking about names again," Sarah said, carefully placing her camera equipment into padded cases. "If it's a girl, maybe Sierra. You know, after the mountains we love so much?" She rubbed her belly thoughtfully, feeling the gentle movements of their child. "And if it's a boy, what about River? Nature names feel right for our little adventurer." Michael emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 cups of tea, herbal for Sarah and black coffee for himself. He settled beside her on the sofa, careful not to disturb her camera arrangement. "Sierra Mitchell Richardson does have a nice ring to it," he admitted, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "Though I still think River might get teased in school. Kids can be creative with nicknames." "Says the man whose middle name is Danger?" Sarah laughed, leaning into his warmth. "Your parents really thought that through, didn't they?" "Hey, Michael Danger Richardson commands respect," he grinned, then grew more serious. "Are you absolutely sure about this trip, Sarah? I know we planned it months ago, but now that you're 6 months along, maybe we should consider staying closer to Denver. There are beautiful places in Rocky Mountain National Park that are only 2 hours away." Sarah had heard this concern from everyone. Her sister Emma had called 3 times this week from Chicago, each conversation ending with the same worried refrain about pregnant women camping in wilderness areas. Her mother had sent articles about bear encounters and thermal injuries in Yellowstone. Even their friends had raised eyebrows when Sarah announced their plans at their last dinner party. "Michael, I need this trip," Sarah said, her voice taking on the determined tone he recognized from her most ambitious photography projects. "In 3 months, our lives are going to change completely. We'll have diaper bags instead of camera bags, sleepless nights instead of starlit camping adventures. This is our last chance to experience true wilderness together, just the 2 of us." She paused, watching dust motes dance in the morning sunlight. "Besides, I've been feeling incredible lately. The morning sickness is completely gone. I have more energy than I've had in months, and the baby's movements tell me they're excited about the adventure too." Michael studied his wife's face, recognizing the passionate expression that had first attracted him to her at a photography exhibition 4 years ago. She had been explaining the story behind a stunning sunrise photograph taken from a dangerous cliff edge in Rocky Mountain National Park, her enthusiasm infectious, as she described waiting 3 hours in freezing temperatures to capture the perfect moment. That dedication to her art, combined with her fearless approach to life, had made him fall in love immediately. "Okay," he said finally, "but we stick to the plan exactly as we've discussed it. Established campsites only. No wandering off marked trails without proper communication, and if you feel even slightly uncomfortable, we head back immediately. Deal?" Sarah's face lit up with excitement. "Deal. And don't worry, I've researched everything extensively. We'll be camping at Shoshone Lake, which has designated backcountry sites and regular ranger patrols. It's remote enough for incredible wildlife photography, but safe enough for a pregnant woman who knows her limits." She pulled out her laptop and opened the detailed itinerary she had been refining for weeks. "Look at this weather forecast. Perfect conditions for the next 5 days. Clear skies, mild temperatures during the day, cool but not freezing at night. It's absolutely ideal." Michael leaned over to examine her screen, noting the meticulous planning that rivaled his own software project management. Sarah had researched everything from optimal photography lighting conditions to the migration patterns of elk and bison. She had downloaded offline maps, studied thermal area safety protocols, and even contacted other photographers who had worked in the region during similar time periods. "I have to admit, your research is impressive," Michael said, scrolling through her detailed notes. "You've thought of everything from backup battery packs for your camera equipment to extra water purification tablets. Though I notice you've marked several locations that seem pretty far from our base camp." Sarah's eyes gleamed with professional excitement. "Those are potential photography spots. There are thermal pools in areas where most tourists never venture, places where wildlife comes to drink without human interference. Imagine the photographs I could capture. Maybe a family of elk at dawn, reflected in perfectly still water with steam rising around them. Those are the images that get featured in National Geographic." The passion in her voice reminded Michael why he had supported her photography career, even when it meant weekends spent hiking in challenging conditions or waiting hours in uncomfortable positions for the perfect shot. Sarah's work had been gaining recognition over the past year, with several of her pieces selected for local gallery shows, and one stunning landscape featured in a regional outdoor magazine. The pregnancy had only intensified her desire to capture meaningful moments, as if she understood that this phase of their life was precious and fleeting. "Just promise me you won't take any unnecessary risks," Michael said, his hand moving to rest on her belly where their child moved gently in response to his touch. "I know your art is important, but nothing is more important than you two coming home safely." Sarah covered his hand with hers, feeling the familiar flutter of movement that had become their child's way of communicating. "I promise. Besides, you'll be with me every step of the way, and you're the most cautious person I know. Between your safety planning and my wilderness experience, we'll be the most prepared campers in Yellowstone history." The afternoon passed in a flurry of final preparations. Michael triple-checked their emergency supplies while Sarah organized her photography equipment, with the systematic approach of a professional who had learned the hard way that forgotten gear could mean missed opportunities. Their backpacks lay open on the bed, filled with carefully selected items that balanced Sarah's photographic needs with the practical requirements of backcountry camping. "I still can't believe you convinced the permit office to let us camp in such a remote area while you're pregnant," Michael said, folding their sleeping bags with military precision. "That ranger on the phone seemed pretty concerned when you mentioned your due date." Sarah laughed, remembering the lengthy conversation with the Yellowstone backcountry office. "I may have emphasized my years of wilderness experience more than my current condition. Plus, I pointed out that we'd be there during the safest weather window of the year, and you have wilderness first aid certification. We're probably better prepared than most visitors." Their friends Jake and Lisa arrived that evening for a farewell dinner, bringing homemade cookies and enough worried advice to last the entire trip. Lisa, who was 7 months pregnant with her second child, had been particularly vocal about her concerns regarding Sarah's adventure plans. "I just don't understand why you can't wait until after the baby's born," Lisa said, settling carefully into their dining room chair. "Yellowstone will still be there next year, and you'll have incredible photographs to take of your child experiencing nature for the first time." Sarah served the pasta she had prepared, moving with the careful grace she had developed as her center of gravity shifted. "Lisa, I appreciate the concern. I really do. But next year we'll have a newborn who needs consistent feeding schedules and temperature control. This is literally our last opportunity for this kind of adventure as just the two of us." Jake, who had been examining Michael's detailed trail maps spread across the dining table, looked up with genuine admiration. "I have to say, you guys have planned this better than most military operations I've seen. Michael, these maps are incredibly detailed. You've marked water sources, elevation changes, even potential weather shelter locations." Michael felt a flush of pride at the recognition of his planning efforts. "I figure if we're going to do this, we might as well do it right. Sarah's the artist and the wilderness expert, but I can contribute by making sure we're prepared for every possible scenario." He pointed to various marks on his maps. "These red X's are ranger stations with radio contact. These blue circles are established campsites with bear-proof food storage, and these green triangles are emergency shelter locations in case weather conditions change unexpectedly." The conversation continued through dinner, with Sarah sharing her excitement about photographing Yellowstone's geothermal features during the golden hour lighting conditions that occurred just after sunrise. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and gradually even Lisa's concerns gave way to genuine excitement about the adventure her friends were embarking upon. "Just promise you'll check in regularly," Lisa said as they prepared to leave. "I know cell service is spotty out there, but whenever you get signal, send us a message so we know you're okay." Sarah hugged her friend carefully, mindful of both their pregnant bellies. "I promise we'll be in touch whenever possible, and when we get back, I'll have incredible photographs to show you and stories that will make you want to plan your own adventure once your little one is old enough." After their friends left, Sarah and Michael spent the evening doing final equipment checks and reviewing their itinerary one more time. The apartment felt different now, filled with the anticipation of adventure and the underlying current of nervous excitement that accompanied any journey into true wilderness. "Are you nervous?" Sarah asked as they lay in bed, Michael's hand resting on her belly where their child moved actively in the darkness. "A little," Michael admitted honestly. "Not about your abilities or our preparation, but just the normal anxiety that comes with heading into country where we can't call for help if something goes wrong. It's a healthy kind of nervous, though, the kind that keeps you alert and careful." Sarah smiled in the darkness, feeling the familiar excitement that always preceded her photography expeditions. "I love that feeling. It means we're about to do something meaningful, something that will challenge us and create memories we'll carry forever." She paused, listening to the gentle sounds of their neighborhood settling into nighttime quiet. "I want our child to grow up knowing that their parents were adventurous, that we didn't let fear keep us from experiencing the world's most beautiful places." The next morning dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for the drive to Yellowstone. Sarah woke early, her internal clock adjusted to the photographer's schedule of capturing optimal lighting conditions. She found Michael already awake, quietly reviewing their route one final time on his phone. "Ready for this?" he asked, noting the excitement in her eyes that always appeared when she was preparing for a photography expedition. "I've been ready for months," Sarah replied, her hand moving instinctively to her belly where their child responded with gentle kicks. "Let's go create some magic." They loaded their carefully organized gear into their Subaru Outback, the vehicle they had chosen specifically for its reliability on mountain roads and its ability to handle changing weather conditions. Sarah's photography equipment filled one entire section of the cargo area, protected by foam padding and waterproof cases that had traveled with her to dozens of remote locations across the western United States. As they pulled away from their apartment building, Sarah rolled down her window and breathed in the crisp Denver morning air. The city was just waking up around them, early commuters beginning their daily routines while she and Michael headed toward an adventure that would take them far from civilization's comfortable predictability. 5 hours to Yellowstone, Michael announced, consulting his carefully planned route that included stops for gas, food, and Sarah's increasing need for bathroom breaks. "We should arrive at the ranger station by early afternoon, get our permits confirmed, and reach Shoshone Lake with plenty of time to set up camp before dark." Sarah adjusted her camera in the front seat, ready to capture images of their journey through the changing landscapes of Colorado, Wyoming, and finally into the wilderness that had captured her imagination since childhood. The morning stretched ahead of them, full of promise and possibility, carrying them toward an adventure that would be their last, as just the two of them before becoming three. Neither of them could have imagined that this perfect morning, filled with careful planning and excited anticipation, would be among the last normal moments of their carefully constructed life together. The last confirmed sighting of Sarah and Michael Mitchell Richardson was on September 14, 2009, at 4:47 p.m., when fellow camper David Chen photographed them hiking toward the thermal areas near Shoshone Lake. Sarah's distinctive red backpack and Michael's methodical pace were captured in the background of Chen's sunset photograph, a detail that would become crucial evidence in the days that followed. Within 24 hours, their carefully planned adventure would transform into Yellowstone's most haunting mystery. September 15, 2009, began like any other morning at Yellowstone's backcountry office, with Ranger Patricia Wolf reviewing overnight reports and preparing for routine patrol duties. Patricia had worked Yellowstone's wilderness areas for 12 years, long enough to develop an intuitive sense for when something felt wrong in her territory. That morning, as she sipped her coffee and reviewed the backcountry permit log, she noticed that permit holders Sarah and Michael Mitchell Richardson had failed to check in via radio at their scheduled 8 a.m. contact time. Probably just sleeping in, she muttered to herself, making a note to attempt contact again in 2 hours. Pregnant campers often needed extra rest, and the couple's detailed permit application had impressed her with its thoroughness. Michael's wilderness first aid certification and Sarah's years of backcountry photography experience had convinced Patricia that they were among the more prepared visitors she had encountered that season. By 10 a.m., when the second radio check yielded only static, Patricia felt the first flutter of concern. She contacted Ranger Station Alpha, requesting that Ranger Martinez conduct a visual check of the Shoshone Lake area during his afternoon patrol. "Probably nothing," she told Martinez over the radio, "but I've got a pregnant camper who missed 2 check-ins. Better safe than sorry." Martinez reached the Shoshone Lake backcountry area at 2:30 p.m., expecting to find Sarah and Michael enjoying a lazy afternoon by the water, or perhaps napping in their tent during the day's warmest hours. Instead, he discovered something that would haunt him for years to come. Their campsite stood exactly as regulation required, tent properly positioned with guy lines secured against wind, bear canister positioned the regulation 100 yards from sleeping area, but the site felt wrong in a way that defied immediate explanation. "Base, this is Martinez at Shoshone Lake Campsite 14, he radioed, his voice carrying the careful neutrality that rangers learned when reporting unusual situations. "I've located the Mitchell-Richardson campsite, but the permit holders are not present. Their tent and equipment appear undisturbed, but I'm seeing some irregularities that warrant further investigation." Martinez approached the tent with the caution his training demanded, noting details that would later prove crucial to investigators. The tent zipper was closed but not fully secured, leaving a gap of approximately 6 inches that would have allowed insects and small animals inside. Sarah's photography equipment cases sat in perfect order outside the tent, but her primary camera and telephoto lens were missing. Most significantly, the couple's carefully prepared breakfast lay untouched on their camp table, 2 bowls of oatmeal now cold and attracting flies. "Base, I need you to contact the backcountry office and request immediate backup," Martinez continued, his voice growing more tense as he processed the scene. "Food left out overnight in bear country, tent improperly secured, and no sign of the permit holders. This is looking like a possible emergency situation." Within 3 hours, Yellowstone's search and rescue protocol was activated. Ranger Wolf arrived at the campsite, accompanied by search coordinator Janet Stevens, whose 25 years of wilderness rescue experience had taught her to read the subtle signs that distinguished genuine emergencies from simple communication breakdowns. Stevens examined the campsite with methodical precision, photographing every detail while her trained eye cataloged the inconsistencies that troubled her. "The breakfast preparation tells us they were here this morning," Stevens observed, pointing to the still damp dishwater in their portable basin. 2 bowls, 2 spoons, coffee prepared but not consumed. Whatever happened occurred between their morning routine and approximately 9 a.m., when they should have made radio contact. The discovery of Michael's detailed trail map, left inside the tent with penciled notations, provided their first clue about the couple's intended activities. His careful handwriting marked several thermal features located approximately 2 miles northeast of their campsite, with notes about optimal photography lighting and Sarah's specific interest in capturing wildlife at natural thermal pools. She was documenting thermal features for a photography project, Stevens explained to the growing team of searchers. According to their permit application, Sarah specializes in wilderness photography and was particularly excited about Yellowstone's geothermal areas. Michael's notes suggest they planned to spend Tuesday morning photographing thermal pools in the Specimen Ridge area. As afternoon faded into evening, the initial search team expanded to include thermal area specialists and wildlife tracking experts. The terrain Sarah and Michael had planned to explore presented unique challenges for search operations, with unstable ground conditions around thermal features and dense forests that could hide evidence from even experienced searchers. Additionally, the approaching sunset meant that detailed ground searches would need to wait until morning, leaving precious hours when the couple could be moving further from help if they were lost or injured. "We're dealing with a 6 months pregnant woman and her husband who may be attempting to self-rescue in challenging terrain," Stevens explained to her team during the evening briefing. "Our priority is establishing a search perimeter around likely routes between their campsite and the thermal areas Michael marked on his map. Tomorrow morning, we'll begin systematic grid searches of the most probable areas." Meanwhile, 800 miles away in Chicago, Sarah's sister, Emma Richardson, was experiencing the restless anxiety that she would later describe as intuitive knowledge that something was terribly wrong. Emma had been expecting Sarah's daily text message update, a routine they had maintained throughout Sarah's pregnancy, to ease their mother's concerns about her adventurous daughter's wilderness activities. "She always texts by evening," Emma told her husband Marcus as they finished dinner in their Lincoln Park apartment. "Even when they're camping in areas without cell service, Sarah finds a way to get signal and send at least a quick message saying they're okay. She knows how worried Mom gets." Marcus, accustomed to his wife's protective instincts regarding her younger sister, initially dismissed Emma's concerns as typical family anxiety. "Maybe their phone battery died, or they're in a particularly remote area tonight. You know, Sarah's probably got Michael hiking to the perfect sunset photography spot, completely losing track of time." But Emma's worry intensified throughout the evening, fueled by an inexplicable sense that her sister needed help. By 11 p.m. Mountain Time, she was calling Yellowstone's emergency number, explaining her concerns to a dispatcher who had fielded dozens of similar calls from worried family members over the years. "Ma'am, I understand your concern, but it's not unusual for backcountry campers to be out of communication for several days," the dispatcher explained patiently. "Your sister and brother-in-law have permits for a 5-day trip, and they're only on day 2. Unless they fail to check out on their designated exit date, there's no protocol for initiating search procedures based on missed communication with family members." Emma's frustration with the bureaucratic response would later motivate her to become one of the most persistent advocates for missing persons in wilderness areas. But that night, she could only pace her apartment and fight the growing certainty that something had gone catastrophically wrong in Yellowstone's vast wilderness. September 16th dawned clear and cold, perfect weather for the extensive search operation that Stevens had organized overnight. 12 experienced search and rescue volunteers joined park rangers in a systematic exploration of the thermal areas that Michael had marked on his trail map. The searchers moved in carefully coordinated lines, each person responsible for thoroughly examining a designated corridor while maintaining visual contact with team members on either side. "Remember, we're looking for any sign of passage," Stevens instructed her team during the pre-dawn briefing. "Footprints in soft ground, disturbed vegetation, dropped equipment, fabric caught on branches. Sarah is 6 months pregnant, so she may have needed frequent rest stops or chosen easier routes than marked trails. Michael appears to be methodical and safety conscious, so if they encountered problems, he likely would have attempted to signal for help or leave markers." The first significant discovery came at 10:30 a.m., when searcher volunteer Tom Bradley found a protein bar wrapper bearing Michael's thumbprint, located approximately 1.2 miles from their campsite, along a faint game trail leading toward the thermal features. The wrapper's position suggested they had followed the route Michael had planned, confirming that the search team was pursuing the correct direction. This puts them on the expected track as of yesterday morning. Stevens radioed to base camp. The rapper's condition suggests it was dropped recently, probably within the last 24 hours. We're continuing northeast toward the thermal areas marked on Mitchell's map. However, as the day progressed and searchers covered increasingly challenging terrain, the trail of evidence grew frustratingly sparse. The rocky ground around Yellowstone's thermal features preserved few clear footprints, and the constantly shifting geological conditions meant that signs of passage could disappear quickly. Additionally, the thermal areas presented serious safety challenges for the search teams themselves, with unstable ground and dangerous gases requiring careful navigation, even for experienced wilderness professionals. Dr. Robert Chen, Yellowstone's chief geologist, joined the afternoon search to provide expertise on thermal area safety and the geological hazards that could pose threats to inexperienced visitors. His knowledge of the region's subsurface thermal activity proved invaluable in identifying areas where the ground might be unstable or where dangerous gases could accumulate. The thermal features in this area are particularly dynamic, Dr. Chen explained to the search team during their afternoon briefing. Underground thermal activity can create new vents or cause existing ground to become unstable without warning. If the Mitchells encountered a ground collapse or unexpected thermal event, they might not have been able to signal for help or navigate back to safety. The psychological impact of Chen's assessment weighed heavily on the search team, particularly those who had hoped to find Sarah and Michael sheltering in place after a minor mishap. The reality that they might be dealing with a serious geological emergency, rather than a simple navigation error, transformed the search from rescue operation to potential recovery mission. As the second day of searching concluded without additional evidence, Stevens made the difficult decision to expand the search area and request additional resources from neighboring agencies. We're dealing with a time-critical situation involving a pregnant woman who may be injured or trapped in challenging terrain, she explained during her evening report to park headquarters. I'm requesting helicopter support for aerial reconnaissance and additional personnel from Jackson Hole Search and Rescue. The expansion of search operations caught the attention of regional media outlets, transforming a local missing persons case into a story that resonated with audiences across the country. The combination of a pregnant woman, experienced wilderness visitors, and Yellowstone's dramatic landscape created compelling human interest elements that news organizations found irresistible. Pregnant photographer missing in Yellowstone became the headline that appeared across dozens of newspapers and websites, accompanied by the engagement photograph that Emma had provided to authorities. The image showed Sarah and Michael hiking together in Rocky Mountain National Park, their faces glowing with happiness and adventure, creating a poignant contrast with the growing fears about their fate. The media attention brought unexpected assistance to the search efforts, with dozens of volunteers offering to join the organized search teams, and hundreds of social media users sharing Sarah and Michael's photographs and information. However, it also created additional pressure on park authorities to provide regular updates and explanations about search procedures, diverting valuable personnel from actual search activities. By September 18th, the fourth day of search operations, the official search area had expanded to cover over 50 square miles of some of Yellowstone's most challenging terrain. Helicopter reconnaissance had provided aerial photography of the entire region, allowing analysts to identify potential locations where individuals might seek shelter or where evidence might be visible from above. We've now covered every accessible area within a reasonable distance of their planned route, Stevens reported during her daily briefing. The helicopter crews have photographed approximately 200 square miles of surrounding wilderness, and ground teams have conducted detailed searches of all high-probability areas. We're reaching the point where we need to consider expanding our search parameters or acknowledging that we may be dealing with a situation where the missing persons are no longer in the immediate area. The possibility that Sarah and Michael had somehow traveled far beyond the search area seemed unlikely given Sarah's pregnant condition and the couple's methodical approach to wilderness travel. However, the complete absence of additional evidence forced search coordinators to consider scenarios that ranged from voluntary departure to more disturbing possibilities involving foul play or catastrophic accidents. Emma arrived in Yellowstone on September 19th, driving straight through from Chicago in a journey fueled by caffeine and desperation. Her first sight of the massive search operation both reassured and terrified her, confirming that authorities were taking her sister's disappearance seriously, while simultaneously emphasizing the scale of wilderness where Sarah could be lost. "I need to understand exactly what you've found and where you've searched," Emma told Stevens during their first meeting at the incident command post. "Sarah knows wilderness survival, and Michael is incredibly careful about safety. If they're not responding to search efforts, something catastrophic must have happened to prevent them from signaling for help." Stevens appreciated Emma's direct approach and her obvious knowledge of her sister's capabilities. "We found evidence that they followed their planned route toward thermal areas northeast of their campsite, but the trail goes cold approximately 2 miles from their camp. We're now searching areas where they might have sought shelter or where they could be trapped without the ability to signal." The search operation continued for 7 more days, with teams covering increasingly remote areas and employing specialized equipment, including ground-penetrating radar and thermal imaging cameras. The dedication of the search teams impressed Emma, but each day without discovery increased her growing certainty that her sister and brother-in-law had encountered something beyond typical wilderness mishaps. On September 26th, 11 days after Sarah and Michael's disappearance, Yellowstone authorities officially suspended active search operations while maintaining the case as an open investigation. The decision devastated Emma, but reflected the reality that further organized searching was unlikely to produce results without new evidence or information about the couple's possible location. "This doesn't mean we're giving up," Stevens explained to Emma during their final official meeting. "Every ranger in this park will continue watching for any sign of your sister and Michael. We'll investigate every report, every possible sighting, every piece of evidence that emerges. But organized search operations require specific targets, and we've exhausted the areas where they're most likely to be found." Emma returned to Chicago carrying Sarah's photography equipment and the painful knowledge that her sister had vanished into wilderness vast enough to hide secrets for decades. The carefully planned adventure that was supposed to be Sarah and Michael's final journey as a couple had become instead a mystery that would haunt everyone who loved them, leaving questions that seemed destined to remain unanswered in the endless expanse of Yellowstone's unforgiving landscape. 15 years after Sarah and Michael Mitchell Richardson vanished into Yellowstone's wilderness, their disappearance had transformed from urgent mystery into cold case folklore, sustained only by Emma Richardson's relentless determination and the haunting questions that refused to fade with time. On October 12, 2024, elk hunter Jake Harrison was tracking a wounded bull through dense timber near Specimen Ridge when he noticed something metallic reflecting sunlight from within the hollow of a massive fallen pine tree, a discovery that would finally break the silence that had shrouded the case for over a decade. Emma Richardson had never stopped searching. What began as frantic phone calls to park rangers had evolved into a sophisticated missing persons advocacy that consumed her life with methodical intensity. Her Chicago apartment had become an unofficial command center, walls covered with topographical maps marked in different colored pins representing search areas, witness sightings, and potential leads that had emerged over the years. Every vacation day, every weekend, every spare moment was dedicated to keeping Sarah and Michael's case alive in a system that had long since moved on to more recent tragedies. "Most families give up after the first year," Detective Ray Morrison had told Emma during one of their regular phone conversations. Morrison, now retired from the Park County Sheriff's Department, had officially closed the Mitchell-Richardson file in 2012, but the case had lodged itself in his conscience like a splinter that couldn't be removed. "The fact that you're still pushing for answers 15 years later says something about either your dedication or your inability to accept reality." Emma had heard similar assessments from well-meaning friends, family members, and mental health professionals who suggested that her continued investigation represented unhealthy grieving rather than legitimate hope. Her marriage to Marcus had ended in 2018, partly due to her obsessive focus on finding her sister, and her career in marketing had suffered as she diverted increasing amounts of time and energy toward amateur detective work that rarely produced meaningful results. "I've received over 300 tips since 2009, Emma explained to the online support group for families of missing persons that she had joined in 2015. Most are from well-meaning people who think they spotted Sarah and Michael at gas stations or hiking trails across the western states. A few are from individuals with serious mental health issues who confess to crimes they didn't commit. But occasionally, very occasionally, someone provides information that makes me think we're missing something important about what happened in Yellowstone. The most promising lead had emerged in 2019, when a geological survey team reported discovering camping equipment in a remote thermal area, approximately 8 miles from Sarah and Michael's last known location. Emma had driven to Wyoming immediately, convincing park authorities to allow her to examine the recovered items, despite their policy against family involvement in evidence evaluation. The equipment included a sleeping bag, water bottles, and hiking boots that matched the brand Sarah and Michael had purchased for their trip. But DNA testing proved inconclusive, and the items showed weathering patterns inconsistent with 15 years of wilderness exposure. False hope is worse than no hope, Morrison had warned Emma after the equipment discovery led nowhere. You're torturing yourself by chasing every possibility, no matter how remote. Sarah and Michael disappeared in some of the most unforgiving wilderness in North America. Sometimes people vanish without explanation, and we have to accept that some mysteries don't have solutions. But Emma's persistence had gradually created a network of supporters who believed her advocacy served a purpose beyond personal closure. Retired search and rescue volunteers, amateur investigators, and other families of missing persons had formed an informal community dedicated to keeping cold cases active through social media presence and regular communication with authorities. Their efforts had succeeded in generating periodic media attention and ensuring that new park rangers learned about the Mitchell-Richardson case during their orientation training. Dr. Sarah Chen, a forensic anthropologist who had followed the case since 2009, represented the scientific perspective that kept Emma's investigation grounded in realistic possibilities rather than desperate speculation. Yellowstone's geological activity creates unique preservation conditions, Dr. Chen had explained during their 2022 consultation. Thermal areas can accelerate decomposition, but they can also create mineral conditions that preserve organic materials for decades. If Sarah and Michael encountered a geological event, evidence could remain discoverable long after conventional search timelines would suggest. The online community that had formed around unsolved Yellowstone disappearances included hundreds of amateur investigators who analyzed satellite imagery, studied geological surveys, and maintained detailed databases of missing persons cases dating back to the park's establishment. Their work occasionally produced insights that professional investigators had missed, particularly regarding the seasonal patterns of wilderness accidents and the geographical clustering of disappearances in specific areas of the park. There's something about the thermal areas near Specimen Ridge that keeps appearing in missing persons reports, noted forum moderator David Kim during a 2023 online discussion. Not just Sarah and Michael, but at least 4 other cases since 1995, involving experienced outdoors people who vanished without trace in that general area. The geological instability might be creating hazards that aren't adequately marked or understood. Jake Harrison had been hunting elk in Yellowstone's wilderness for over 20 years, long enough to develop an intimate knowledge of animal behavior and terrain features that escaped casual visitors. At 45 years old, Harrison combined the patience of an experienced hunter with the observational skills of someone who had spent decades reading subtle signs in complex natural environments. His hunting success depended on noticing details that most people would overlook, making him precisely the type of person likely to spot evidence that organized search teams might miss. I track wounded animals by following blood trails that are sometimes just a few drops on leaves or rocks, Harrison explained to his hunting partner Mike Stevens as they set up camp for their annual October elk hunt. You learn to see things that don't belong, things that are out of place in the natural pattern. It becomes instinctive after enough years in the woods. The morning of October 12th began with Harrison tracking a bull elk that he had wounded the previous evening during the final minutes of legal hunting light. Ethical hunting practices required him to pursue the animal until he could either recover it or confirm that the wound was non-fatal, leading him through increasingly challenging terrain as the elk sought refuge in dense timber and rocky areas where human pursuit became difficult. The blood trail led me about 3 miles from our camp into country I'd never hunted before, Harrison later recounted to investigators. The elk was moving through fallen timber, probably trying to find heavy cover where it could rest and recover. I was following very faint blood spots, maybe one drop every 50 yards, so I had to move slowly and really examine every surface where blood might have transferred. As Harrison worked his way through the maze of fallen trees, his attention focused entirely on the subtle signs of the elk's passage. He noticed something that immediately struck him as wrong for the natural environment. Approximately 40 feet ahead, metallic reflection caught sunlight filtering through the forest canopy, creating a brief flash that was distinctly artificial in the organic wilderness setting. At first I thought it might be trash left by campers, maybe an aluminum can or piece of camping equipment, Harrison remembered. But as I got closer, I could see that whatever was reflecting light was inside the hollow of a huge fallen pine tree, protected from weather and almost completely hidden, unless you approached from exactly the right angle. The fallen tree was a massive ponderosa pine that had probably died decades earlier, its hollow trunk creating a natural shelter that wildlife often used for protection from weather. Harrison approached carefully, uncertain whether the hollow might contain animals or present safety hazards, but his curiosity about the metallic object overcame his hunter's caution. Inside the hollow, protected by the tree's natural shelter, Harrison discovered a professional camera in a waterproof case that had kept it remarkably preserved despite years of wilderness exposure. The camera equipment was sophisticated and expensive, clearly belonging to a serious photographer rather than a casual tourist, and its position within the hollow suggested deliberate placement rather than accidental loss. I knew immediately that this was something significant, Harrison said. Professional camera equipment doesn't end up in the middle of nowhere by accident, especially not hidden inside a fallen tree. Someone had either deliberately placed it there or had been sheltering in that location when something happened to prevent them from retrieving their equipment. Harrison's discovery would finally provide the breakthrough that Emma Richardson had pursued for 15 years, offering the first concrete evidence of what had happened to Sarah and Michael during their final hours in Yellowstone's wilderness. The camera's memory cards, protected by the waterproof case and the tree's natural shelter, contained the photographic record of their last adventure together, images that would answer some questions while raising others that cut even deeper into the mystery of their disappearance. The camera that Jake Harrison discovered in the hollow pine tree contained 247 photographs spanning Sarah and Michael's 5-day Yellowstone adventure, but it was the final 7 images, captured on September 15, 2009, that would finally reveal the truth about their disappearance and expose a tragic sequence of events that no search team could have anticipated or prevented. Detective Morrison, brought out of retirement to examine Harrison's discovery, met Emma Richardson at the Yellowstone Forensics Laboratory on October 20, 2024. The camera's memory cards had been carefully extracted and analyzed by digital forensic specialists, yielding a photographic timeline that documented every moment of Sarah and Michael's journey until their final tragic encounter with Yellowstone's hidden dangers. The first 240 photographs show exactly what we'd expect from an experienced nature photographer documenting a wilderness adventure, Morrison explained to Emma as they reviewed the images on a high-resolution monitor. Sarah captured stunning landscapes, wildlife encounters, and intimate moments of their camping experience. Michael appears in dozens of shots, always careful and methodical, clearly enjoying their time together despite the challenging terrain. The early photographs revealed Sarah's exceptional skill as a photographer and the couple's genuine happiness during their adventure. Images showed them setting up camp at Shoshone Lake, Michael studying his detailed maps while Sarah organized her equipment, and candid moments of them sharing meals and enjoying the wilderness they both loved. Sarah's pregnancy was visible in several photos, her growing belly a poignant reminder of the life they were anticipating together. Look at this sequence from September 14th, Morrison continued, advancing through a series of photographs taken near thermal pools. Sarah was documenting the interaction between wildlife and geothermal features, exactly what she had planned according to your sister's permit application. The photography is professional quality, but more importantly, it shows they were following safety protocols and staying together as planned. Emma studied the images with a mixture of joy and heartbreak, seeing her sister's artistic vision combined with obvious happiness about her pregnancy and her relationship with Michael. These were the photographs Sarah had dreamed of capturing, images that could have launched her career to new heights if she had survived to share them with the world. The final sequence begins at 8:23 a.m. on September 15th, Morrison said, his voice growing somber as he prepared Emma for what she was about to see. Sarah was photographing a thermal pool area, approximately 2.3 miles from their campsite, in terrain that appeared stable and safe according to all available geological surveys. The first of the final photographs showed Sarah's typical compositional style, capturing the ethereal beauty of steam rising from a clear thermal pool surrounded by mineral deposits that created an otherworldly landscape. Michael appeared in one image, carefully testing the ground stability with a hiking pole, before allowing Sarah to approach for closer shots. This next image was taken at 8:31 a.m., Morrison explained, his finger pointing to timestamp data displayed beside the photograph. Sarah was positioning herself for what would have been an exceptional shot of the thermal pool, with morning light filtering through the steam. The photograph showed the thermal pool from an elevated angle, revealing its remarkable clarity and the intricate mineral formations surrounding its edges. But digital analysis revealed something that Sarah and Michael couldn't have seen with their naked eyes: hairline cracks in the mineral crust surrounding the pool, indicating geological instability that could collapse without warning. The tragedy unfolds in the next 4 photographs, Morrison continued. Image 244 shows the ground beginning to give way beneath Sarah's position. Image 245 captures the moment of collapse, as thermal heated earth and rock created a sinkhole approximately 8 feet deep. Images 246 and 247 show Michael's desperate attempt to reach Sarah after she fell into the newly formed thermal depression. Emma stared at the photographs with growing horror, watching her sister's final moments unfold through the technological miracle of a camera that continued functioning even as disaster struck. The images were blurry and chaotic, clearly taken as the camera fell during the ground collapse, but they told a story more complete than any witness testimony could have provided. Dr. Sarah Chen, the forensic anthropologist who had consulted on the case for 15 years, joined the review to provide geological context for what the photographs revealed. This type of thermal ground collapse is extremely rare but not unprecedented in Yellowstone, Dr. Chen explained. Underground thermal activity can weaken surface materials over decades, creating unstable areas that appear completely safe until sudden failure occurs. The geological analysis revealed that Sarah had fallen into a thermal sinkhole that immediately began filling with hot water and mineral-rich mud from underground sources. The temperature and chemical composition would have made immediate rescue impossible, even if help had been available within minutes of the collapse. Michael's final position, visible in the last photograph, shows him at the edge of the collapse attempting to reach Sarah. Dr. Chen continued. The camera's GPS data indicates this location was never searched because geological surveys had marked the area as stable ground with no known thermal hazards. Morrison's investigation team used the camera's precise GPS coordinates to locate the collapse site, which had been naturally filled and concealed by 15 years of mineral deposition and vegetation growth. Ground-penetrating radar confirmed the presence of a geological depression, consistent with the photographic evidence, finally providing the physical location that searchers had never found. The thermal activity in this area has continued since 2009, explained park geologist Dr. Robert Kim during the site investigation. Mineral deposition gradually filled the collapse area, and natural revegetation made it virtually indistinguishable from surrounding terrain. Without the camera's GPS data, this location might never have been identified. Emma stood at the site where her sister had spent her final moments, trying to reconcile the peaceful meadow before her with the catastrophic events documented in Sarah's photographs. The area showed no visible signs of the tragedy that had occurred there, nature having quietly reclaimed the site while keeping its secrets for 15 years. Sarah and Michael had no way of knowing about the underground thermal instability, Morrison explained to Emma as they examined the site. They followed established safety protocols, carried proper equipment, and stayed together as planned. This was a geological event that couldn't have been predicted or prevented with the information available to them. The discovery prompted Yellowstone authorities to conduct comprehensive geological surveys of all thermal areas accessible to park visitors, identifying several additional locations where similar ground stability issues could pose future hazards. Sarah and Michael's tragedy would ultimately prevent other families from experiencing similar loss through improved safety protocols and geological monitoring. Emma's 15-year search for answers had finally reached its conclusion, but the resolution brought complex emotions rather than simple closure. The photographs proved that Sarah and Michael had not suffered through prolonged survival situations or experienced the violence that some theories had suggested, but they also confirmed that her sister's dreams and her unborn child's future had ended in a moment of geological catastrophe that no preparation could have prevented. Sarah was doing exactly what she loved most when this happened, Emma reflected during her final interview with investigators. She was creating art, documenting the natural world she was passionate about, sharing that adventure with the person she loved most. The tragedy is heartbreaking, but knowing that she spent her final morning pursuing her dreams provides some comfort. The investigation's conclusion brought national attention to the challenges of wilderness safety and the limitations of geological prediction in dynamic environments like Yellowstone. Sarah's photographs, released with Emma's permission, became powerful educational tools for understanding both the beauty and the hidden dangers of thermal wilderness areas. Morrison officially closed the Mitchell-Richardson case on November 15, 2024, exactly 15 years and 2 months after Sarah and Michael's disappearance. The resolution provided answers to questions that had haunted him throughout his retirement, while simultaneously highlighting the randomness of natural disasters that can transform carefully planned adventures into tragedies beyond human control. Emma returned to Chicago carrying copies of her sister's final photographs, images that documented both Sarah's artistic vision and the unpredictable power of the natural world she had loved so deeply. The long search for answers had ended, but Sarah's legacy would continue through improved park safety measures and the haunting beauty of photographs that captured her final moments of creative passion before Yellowstone's hidden dangers claimed her life forever.